Hello everyone, welcome to Kelly's Art Throb. I'm Kelly and today I'm going to be experimenting with some new techniques I learned on someone else's channel. Now why on earth would I go to someone else's channel when I have my own channel? On my video analytics on YouTube, I can tell what other channels my audience likes to watch. And Denise Love's channel keeps popping up over and over and over again. And I thought, I gotta go check out this channel. So I did, and I was delighted. I decided to try some of her techniques out. She looks like she's having such a good time, and I gotta tell you, I was having a problem. I had so many ideas just vibrating, and it was like a pinball machine up in my head. All these ideas were competing, and I just needed a reset, you know? So I switched gears. I turned on Denise's channel and I taped this paper to a very humble clipboard because that's not precious. And I took my fountain pen and I scribbled on the paper and I made a few circles to indicate some zones, which for the most part I ignored. And then I got my Kuretake Gansai Tambi watercolor out because I knew it was a little more opaque and it might be more conducive to this wet on dry overlapping layers. And boy, did I have fun with it. And I just pulled out some brown and sort of this turquoise blue color, and I just had a blast. I just slapped it down with my cheap Fumi supposedly Kolinsky sable brushes, which I love because I don't have to worry about if I'm hurting them. And I just had a blast. I just put it all over the place. And I knew I was going to want some more darker contrasty colors, so I pulled out what looked kind of like burnt umber out of the Kuretake Gansai Tambi, and I put some of that down just wherever, and I rolled it around with my brush and just to get some interesting. You can make marks with paint brushes, you know, it doesn't have to, you know, they can just be very expressive, and oh, had fun with that. I got a little wild with it and got a little wet too. And you know that you can make marks by dabbing off, you know, you can make marks that way too. And speaking of marks, I'm thinking about what I can add some lines, and I pulled out my Art Graph Viarco tailored chalk. It's not really chalk, but it looks like tailor chalk. And I used the side of it, and it made the most beautiful texture because of the texture of the paper. Just picked it up and grabbed it. And then I love these because you can do so many things with them. You can use the edge, you can use the side. They just make a lot of different beautiful marks. And I kind of stopped and took a look, and I thought, I wonder if I can use that white art graph on here and what that would look like. So I just used the corner of it and made some marks, and I liked the way that looked too. Making marks with white or very light, that's something that's kind of new to me that I've been exploring, and I really like it. Then I remembered that if I wetted these, they would become more vibrant, so I sprayed them. And do you see how that texture just popped off the page there? That was pretty exciting. And even the white chalk became more white, but maybe I sprayed it a little too much. But I thought it would be fun to see what would happen if, you know, if I had some drips. Just look at those milky drips. Isn't that exciting? I was mesmerized watching it. And then I just had to stop and just admire the way it looked at this point. Isn't that pretty? And can you see it's still dripping a little bit? My desk is a little bit slanted, so you can see that just dripping along a little bit. Well, if you're going to admire it, you're also going to judge it. And I'm not sure, I might have started that a little too soon, but I was afraid that that was going to be a little too milky and make it dull. So I took a brush and I sort of sopped up some of it, and it was still a little bit wet. So I pulled out my sea sponge and I sopped up some of that moisture, and then I tapped it off on different areas of the painting. And so maybe I did judge too quickly, but if I hadn't, I wouldn't have gotten all those cool textures from the sea sponge. So I don't know, you can second guess yourself all over the place. I guess you should just not overthink it. That's the point. Just don't overthink it and have a good time, for goodness sake. And just explore. And, I really like Denise's philosophy that if the composition isn't good, which it probably won't be, you can cut it up. Oh my gosh, it's making me think I would really like to do a really huge piece of paper. And well, by huge, I mean maybe 16 by 20. And then I wonder if do you think I'd have to buy bigger paintbrushes? I could probably find a reason to buy bigger paintbrushes then. I don't know, but I had a lot of ideas. It sparked a lot more ideas, but not the kind that necessarily compete and boggle down your brain and make you frustrated. And oh my gosh, this is my favorite part, when I get to use pens. And I really am loving the Posca markers on these Kuretake Gansai Tambis. And I love the way they show up. Sometimes they don't show up as well on regular watercolors. It just kind of depends. But I pulled out this really kind of cool color. It's an ivory kind of a color, and that was fun to use. And then, of course, I pulled out my brush pen, which I've been using a lot more lately, and I just love it. I'm getting the hang of doing this whole thick to thin and how to make sure there's enough ink kind of in that little, it's like a little, you can see through it. It's above the brush tip, but it's in like this little section or channel. And you just squeeze up a little bit of it, and then your pen isn't as dry. And I have been having a blast making these really, I love the way these, my husband gets so mad at me because I never finish sentences. I just drop off and my brain goes in another direction, and I start talking as though everybody knows the end of my thought because I finished it and I'm off to the next one. Does anyone else do that? Anyway, yeah, I just love the undulating lines that this thick thin does. It's so sensual, and it's beautiful, and it's expressive, and it kind of looks a little bit like string theory, what I imagined string theory would look like, but it's also like life. It almost looks like blood vessels, or I don't know, it's very organic, and I love it. I can't get enough of it. Even when the brush is a little bit dry, that can create kind of a cool texture too on top of this cold press watercolor. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. If I don't, I can go back over it a little bit and juice it up a little bit more. Here I had a mix. I think it was a mix of really juicy, wet, saturated lines, and some dry, kind of grainy looking lines. Getting that thick, thin is all a matter of pressure, how much you push down on the brush, and also a little bit of the angle that you hold the brush. And if it's real perpendicular to the paper and you put just a tiny bit of pressure, you're going to get that razor thin line. Now, even though I like the light ink, I'm not crazy about the lines that I drew. So I'm being judgy here, and I'm going to see what else I can do with them, okay? And I don't know. We'll see how it goes. When in doubt, just put some different lines elsewhere and see what happens. I think that I got a little too fussy here, and maybe it would have been better if I could. But see, again, don't judge, Kelly. Just embrace the experience and the process, and don't worry about it. Okay, Denise has this Kuretake gold paste. I don't have that. I have some kind of acrylic gold ink, but it works pretty good too. So, and I love the fact that Denise says use the supplies you have. You don't have to go out and buy other stuff, and I believe that too. I don't think sometimes you do, but for this you definitely don't. And so I'm using I think it's Talon's Echo. I don't know. I'll put it in the description. But yeah, and I also, I got these little tools at the dollar store for, a whole bunch of them for $1. And yeah, they're not like expensive tools, but they'll work. They work just as good as the expensive ones for this. And yeah. Okay, and here I decided to try some gold. And mixed results on this. It sort of clouded it a little bit. And I ended up dabbing a whole bunch of it off, and then I think I dabbed it on the rest of the painting. In the end, it looked okay, especially because this part here is not going to be, I'm going to end up making a greeting card for my husband's birthday out of this. And so this part ended up not being on the main part of the card, and it actually ended up looking great. So yeah, let's cut it up, man. Let's cut it up. Unfortunately, I don't have footage of every little bit of it that I did, but I had some greeting cards that I was going to use and just glue this to the face of the greeting card. So I put it on my little cutting mat, and I squared it up and made sure that the margins around it were going to be nice and even. And then I just glued it to the face of the card. Not a big deal, you guys. I used this, it's like a running glue that you glue on, so it's not wet. And I unfortunately don't have footage of me cutting those little circles out, but you can figure that part out. It's easy, and I used some black cardstock to go behind it as accent, and it just turned out great, you guys. So thanks for watching. Go check out Denise's channel if you haven't already. You probably have. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys. Bye. See you later.